Before dawn on the Lower East Side, pushcarts rattled and stairwells smelled of soup. Families stretched coins with rye bread, pickles, beans, and barley. Sabbath stews went to dot the baker's oven while kids fetched milk from the corner. Tonight, 25 tenement dinners. People actually ate immigrant staples, street bargains, and comfort from crowded kitchens. Neighbours shared pots across landings. Flavours drifted through halls. One rye bread with schmaltz and onions. Thick rye slices carried a glossy smear of schmaltz and a scatter of soft onions, the stairwell dot filling with a savoury hush. Fat rendered low in a pan, chilled until spoonable, then spread dot edge to edge. A pinch of salt, maybe a crack of pepper, and supper felt bigger than the coin that bought it. Kosher butchers saved trimmings, cooks saved every spoonful. Rye stayed affordable, dot hearty, and sturdy in the hand. This was everyday fuel that didn't apologize richness, distilled from scraps, eaten standing by the window, the city humming outside and warmth dot settling in from the first bite. 2. Herring with potatoes. Barrel herring came home wrapped in paper, sliced thin, its brine bright against plain boiled, potatoes, a drizzle of vinegar, a ring of onion, maybe a heel of black bread to mop the plate. Nothing fussy, everything deliberate, the salt and starch balancing like old friends across the dot table. Herring was certainty when pay was thin. Potatoes were the honest ballast of winter kids, learned to like the bite, adults leaned on the steadiness. It was a dinner that didn't need a stove long, didn't pretend to be fancy, and still tasted like a sure thing after a hard week. 3. Cabbage potato soup. A pot of cabbage, potato, and onion turned the kitchen into a small bathhouse of steam. Onions sweated till sweet, cabbage softened, potatoes gave body. A splash of vinegar dot sharpened the edges. Ladled into deep bowls, it fogged glasses and rested sore hands on the rim for warmth. Winter vegetables behaved, keeping well and costing little. One pot stretched across floors and days, reheated with a crust of bread for dipping. It carried news from home in its smell. Dot and the hush that followed the first spoonful said everything about comfort earned, not dot bought, in crowded rooms. 4. Kosher varnishes. Buckwheat toasted until nutty met bow-tie noodles slicked with onion and a little fat, every dot grain holding its ground. The pan went from stove to table with a wooden spoon, and the first scoop told you it would stick with you till morning, simple, steady, and deeply familiar. Kosher stayed cheap and satisfying. Onions turned sweet in the pan and asked for little else. A small portion felt generous because it ate like more. On Tuesdays or Thursdays, it tasted like a pause button quiet food that reminded everyone there was enough, and that enough could be good. 5. Cholent dot Friday afternoons. Beans, barley, potatoes, and a precious cut of meat went into a heavy pot. The lid closed, and the baker's oven kept watch through the night. By midday Saturday, the dotster came home dark and fragrant, a Sabbath anchor that asked for patience and gave dot back plenty. Overnight cooking solved rules and budgets at one snow work on the holy day, no need for dot extra fuel. Cheap grains swelled, bones gave themselves to the broth. A single ladle tasted of rest and belonging, neighbours borrowing bowls and returning them clean, the stairwell scented with shared celebration. 6. Chicken soup with matzo balls. Golden broth carried soft carrots, a wisp of dill, and dumplings that floated like little moons. Bones gave the pot its backbone, steam fogged narrow windows and coaxed everyone to the table. A spoonful settled nerves and cleared throats. In busy stairwells, this smelled like someone watching over you. Cooks simmered thrift, backs, necks, and feet saved from the butcher, onions and celery scraped from market bins, and fat rendered on low heat. Matzo meal and eggs turned pantry into pillows. The pot asked for time more than coins, stretching flavour across days, reheats, dot and refills, meaning outran medicine. The first sip said rest, and the second said you'll be all right. Across accents and doorways, it became a common cure, carried in jars to neighbours and dot tucked into sick rooms. On cold nights, broth and dumplings stitched the block together, quiet and warm. 7. Potato or kosher Knishes. Hand pies rode home in warm paper, edges crimped, centres heavy with comfort. Potato. Filling tasted creamy and calm. Buckwheat brought toast and earth, a bite broke like a sigh, steam meeting winter air. On stoops and pushcart corners, a niche stood in for dinner and felt honest. Dough rolled thin on floured boards, filled deep, then baked on sheet pans that blackened with use. Potatoes, onions, and schmaltz made the cheap taste rich. Kosher turned scraps. Noble vendors' learned faces and favoured corners, stacking trays so the smell could do the talking at dusk. A niche travelled well between shifts, remaining warm in a pocket and generous in the hand. Kids split one on the walk up 5 flights. Adults ate standing, shoulders softening. It was portable consolation, old country technique parked on a new world curb, priced so no one had to skip. 8. Borscht or shove. Beet borscht arrived like a ruby window, sweet, earthy and sour enough to wake you, served hot in frost or chilled in July. It wore a ring of dill and sometimes a spoon of dairy. Shove went the other way, sorrel's lemon bite cooling the body after streets baked. Pots held beets, onions, and cabbage simmered until the colour spread like ink. A pinch of sugar balanced vinegar, greens surrendered their tang. In summer, soup rested on fire, escapes to cool before the icebox. The same thrift to seasons, warmth when breath smoked, cold relief when shirts stuck. Both bowls painted grey rooms with brightness. They made colour out of coins, turning market seconds into pride. A ladle taught children the names of vegetables. Another ladle told elders they were remembered. Whether beet-stained smiles or shoves puckered grins, the spoon carried season and story together. 9. Barrel pickles and sauerkraut. Half sours snapped clean, full sours bit back and lingered. Kraut came loose by the scoop, briny and bright, waking up bread and meatless plates. Barrels lined sidewalks like short soldiers, their lids lifted by vendors with stained ladles and quick hands. The air around them laughed with vinegar. Cucumbers and cabbage found second lives in salt and thyme. Fermentation needed barrels, patience, and street shade, not coins. Families bought a nickel's worth, then another jars appeared in windows, guarding what summer gave against winter. For the price of a Subway token, you bought crunch and sunshine. These were not just sides, they were appetite makers, plate stretchers, and memory keepers. Children learned sour young and never forgot it. Pickle brine cut the heaviness of starch and fat, making the simple feel complete. On lean nights, a spear and a slice turned supper into something lively. Makers worked fast, grate, squeeze, season, fry, flipping by rhythm and listening for the right hiss. All was counted carefully, but used generously when it mattered. Potatoes stayed cheap, onions waited in a net bag. The pan delivered plenty from almost nothing, one skillet at a time. The smell lingered for days, a ribbon that tied past to present. Neighbours recognised it and smiled, even if they weren't stopping by. Lots fed celebration, remembrance, and simple hunger in equal measure. Grease marks on newsprint told the story. Joy travels, and it tastes like crisp edges and warmth. 11. Liver and onions. Thin sliced liver hit a hot pan and met onions gone sweet, turning a thrifty cut into a savoury plate. The sear was quick, the juices saved, and a splash of broth pulled brown flavour from the skillet. Pepper and a breath of garlic did the work. It smelled adult and restorative, the kind of supper that steadied people after long shifts and cold stairwells. A heel of bread turned a lean night generous. Butchers priced offal low, so families learned to cook it perfectly, not apologetically. A plate of liver and onions made rent money stretch without feeling spare. Rye waited nearby to swipe the pan, and a sour pickle cut the richness. In cramped kitchens, this dish said dignity. Use the whole animal, season with care, and eat hot by the window. Leftovers, if any, went into next day hash, stretching value again. Nose to tail thrift met deli craft here. Tongue was cheaper than brisket yet tasted luxurious, especially between fresh bread with a pickle chaser. It was a payday treat that still respected the budget, the sort of sandwich a parent brought home like a small celebration. One sandwich could be halved and shared up 5 flights, a quiet feast behind a thin door. 13. Gefilte fish carp pike. Gefilte fish turned river catch and market scraps into delicate quenelles, poached in and on iony broth. Carp, pike, or whitefish were ground with onion and binder, shaped by steady hands, and simmered until the kitchen grew quiet and fragrant. Chilled slices glistened beside beet horseradish, ready for Sabbath, a baby naming, or a Sunday visit. A thin aspic set around the slices when the pot cooled on the sill. Cheap fish became plenty through technique, not expense. Bones sweetened the broth, carrots lent colour. A few eggs bound the mixture so it sliced neat for guests. Served before the main pot, gefilte fish welcomed elders with softness and courtesy. It tasted like patience, practice, and the week's best bargains well used. Children learned the flavour by holiday. Adults tasted thrift turned graceful. 14. Noodle kugel baked in pans, sometimes savoury with onion and pepper, sometimes sweet, with raisins and a bronze top. Egg noodles tangled with custard and butter, then set into a sliceable block that travelled well from oven to table. A square on a plate brought hush and quick forks around a crowded board, even on a noisy payday night with coats on chair backs. A dusting of crumb or cinnamon made the surface crackle. Pantry noodles and a hot oven made abundance from ordinary things. Kugel kept warm in a tin oven or rested on a sill in winter air, still good by evening prayers. It was the first pun to go at gatherings because it bridged tastes. Elders took savoury, kids chased the sugared crust, leftovers reheated into steady weekday comfort without fuss. A square in a lunch pail travelled intact, traded on the stoop. 15. Early bagels and biolis. Early bagels were chewy rings pulled from boiling water and baked to shine, while biolis, puffed flat with a crater of warm onion and poppy. Baskets arrived warm to doorways and pushcart stands. Mornings smelled of malt and steam. A coin bought breakfast that could be eaten walking, hands wrapped in newsprint against a wind off the river, and a long stair climb. Vendors' shouts mixed with bakery air or working chorus. Bakeries thrived near the tenements, turning flour into livelihood and dependable fuel. Bagels and biolis paired with herring, butter, or nothing at all, just heat, chew, and a quick smear of butter. They fit every age and schedule, from factory clock-ins to school steps. Street to table, they tasted like routine made comforting and sure. Stale rings became crumbs or soup thickeners, keeping costs sane. 16. Pasta icechi chickpeas and pasta. A humble pot of chickpeas simmered with onion, garlic, and a spoon of tomato became a thick, savoury broth. Short pasta went in at the end so it stayed tender, and a drizzle of oil carried the aroma up the stairwell. One ladle filled a bowl to make a meal that lingered warm through homework and street noise. Dry pulses and pasta were the market's sure baits, priced to stretch pay. Fridays in Catholic homes made it a welcome meatless supper, but any night it felt right. It tasted bigger than its cost. Nutty chickpeas, soft pasta, and the faint sweetness of tomatoes. Red heels swiped the last streaks from enamel plates so nothing was wasted. 17. Minestrone greens and bean soup. Minestrone started with a clove in hot oil, then a tumble of escarole or chicory. Beans joined with their starchy broth, and the pot sighed into a gentle simmer. The greens softened but kept their bite, the beans turned silky. A final spoon of oil made the surface glisten like a promise in a thin wick. Greengrocer bundles were cheap, especially near closing, dry beans kept in jars on the sill. Families learned the alchemy, bitter meats creamy, water becomes dinner. Minestrone filled ladles and bellies without apology, the steam fogging windows and warming fingers, a sprinkle of pepper and a scrap of bread completed the bowl and the day. 18. Polenta with tomato rag scraps, cornmeal cooked low and patient turned into a golden bed. Ready for whatever the pot could spare, a ladle of yesterday's ragged just juices, a few shreds painted the surface, and the corn held every flavour. Spoons scraped grooves, plates came back quiet. Simple, steady, and kind to tired hands, cornmeal was a bargain that didn't flinch at hunger. Sauce stretched across a family because polenta listened so well to seasoning. On cold nights, its warmth felt like a second blanket. If any cooled in the pan, it set firm for breakfast, sliced and fried. One pot did double duty, which mattered on third-floor rents. 19. Panel sandwich, chickpea batter set in a shallow tray, chilled, then sliced into neat slabs. In all, the squares turned delicate and crisp at the edges, soft within. They slid into crusty bread with a squeeze of lemon and a whisper of parsley. Hot in the hand, they walked down the block as supper. 20. Irish stew mutton and potatoes. A pot took onions first, then tough mutton and long-cut potatoes, simmered until the broth turned cloudy and rich. The meat surrendered to the slow hour, the potatoes softened into the sauce. Pepper rose in the steam, and bowls gathered on the table like small hearths. Quiet fell except for spoons. Chickpea flour was pantry dependable, meat-free, and proud. Panel made speed and sense for pushcart nights when the oven stayed cold. It satisfied like something fancier, leaving only a paper napkin and a smile. For kids with a nickel, it was independence. For parents, a thrifty win that still felt generous on the tongue. Shoulder cuts were cheap and honest, potatoes even more so. Boarding house habits followed families uptown, and the stick kept them steady through snow and strike. Next day, the pot deepened, served with a heel of bread and a splash of vinegar. It tasted of staying, power work paid, rent due, family fed. Coming up the German counter plates, penny sweets, and settlement house cups that made crowded blocks feel cared for. 21. The sauerkraut with sausage ends, shredded cabbage, salted and soured in barrels, met sausage ends knuckles, tips, and short links the butcher sold for coins. In a coal stove kitchen, the pot's vinegar curl drifted into the hallway, sharp with peppercorns and bay. Smoky pork scented the kraut as neighbours passed, nodding at a smell that promised plates and heat. Rinsed kraut went into a kettle with onion, a splash of water, and those meaty scraps. The lid clattered while the cabbage softened and the pork gave up its fat, turning everything glossy and tender. A spoon of mustard or a knob of butter, if fortune allowed, rounded the tang. The pan held warm on the back eye. Ends were cheap because they were small, but flavour never measured by length. This was payday hope on a Tuesday, piled beside rye or spooned over potatoes. Children chased the pink bits, elders chased the broth with bread heels. It tasted like thrift and care noise outside, comfort inside, and dishes stacked to dry. 22. Kartoffelsuppe potato soup. Potato soup started with onions sweating low, then a crowd of diced potatoes tumbling into the pot. The room went quiet, but for the soft pop of simmering starch. A bay leaf, a pinch of marjoram, maybe a scrap of celery leaf, humble things that turned water into something that hugged the ribs without boasting. Cooks mashed a portion against the pot to thicken the broth, leaving the rest in soft cubes. A little milk or schmaltz, when possible, brought a mild sheen. Otherwise, a knob of margarine worked its mercy. Steam fogged window panes and thawed fingers. The ladle clicked the pot rim in a rhythm that felt like home. Potatoes never complained about price or season. Grocers stacked sacks to the ceiling, a few coins bought supper. Broth might come from saved bones or simply salted water, but the meaning stayed steady, a bowl that steadied a day. Served with black bread, it made conversation gentler and the next errand easier to face. 23. Street chestnuts and soft pretzels. On windy corners, roasters rattled and snapped, turning chestnuts sweet under their scorched shells. Nearby, twisted ropes of dough baked to a shine, slick with brine and scattered in salt. A nickel made decisions simple: warm paper bagged, warm hands, and a path up tenement stairs perfumed with smoke, yeast, and winter air. Chestnuts cracked open with a sigh, flesh tender and a little floury, perfect for sharing 3 ways. Pretzels bent without breaking, their outsides shiny and firm, insides soft and comforting. Men took bites between shifts. Kids traded halves on stoops. Street food meant the kitchen could rest when the purse needed a pause. Pushcarts were the city's pantry, open even when closets were bare. Charcoal, dough, and salt were predictable. Crowds were constant. These snacks bridged the gap between school and supper, or supper and night shift. They carried small joy in cold months' heat you could hold, a salt lick on the tongue, and strength for one more block. 24. Stewed apples with bread. Seconds apples bruised, small, or speckled met sugar and a pinch of cinnamon in a dented pot. As skins slackened and slices collapsed, the kitchen turned orchard sweet. The sauce found stale bread laid in bowls, reviving yesterday's loaf into something spoonable and kind. When luck ran thin, this still tasted like dessert. A splash of water kept the apples from sticking. A dab of fat, if any, gave the gloss of plenty. Some cooks squeezed a bit of lemon or stirred a spoon of jelly saved from summer, warmed through. The fruit loosened its perfume and softened the crust's stubbornness, making quiet plates for tired faces at day's end. Fruit stands discounted the odd and the ripe. Bread heels waited in tins, nothing wasted. Meant everything mattered. This bowl soothed sore throats and long afternoons, and it travelled to bedsides when illness made forks too ambitious. A cheap sweetness, yes, but also a reminder that care can be ladled without counting coins. 25. Settlement house milk, cocoa and bread in settlement kitchens, a line formed for mugs that steamed like small chimneys. Milk warmed gentle, sometimes whisked with cocoa or a spoon of sugar. Met a thick slice of plain bread. Staff kept voices soft, hands quick, and eyes level. Children wrapped fingers around cups and let their shoulders drop. The method was simple and repeatable. Heat, pour, slice, serve, smile. Bread from baker. Donations or day-old racks stacked high beside the urns. Milk arrived by crate, a ladle, measured fairness better than fancy. Even on lean days, someone added a pat of butter or a second slice when shoes looked too thin. Nutrition drives named it service, families called it relief with dignity. A warm cup steadied small bodies for lessons, errands and winter air. In homes where budgets bent and stoves sputtered, those moments proved a neighbourhood could still behave like kin. The meaning lingered longer than the cocoa, seen, warmed and sent on safely. Nutrition drives named it service, families called it relief with dignity. A warm cup steadied small bodies for lessons, errands and winter air. In homes where budgets bent and stoves sputtered, those moments proved a neighbourhood could still behave like kin. The meaning lingered longer than the cocoa, seen, warmed and sent on safely.